Yes, let me take this opportunity to welcome everybody this afternoon to the third in the series of webinars being organized by the OECS Competitive Business Unit. The unit is based in Dominica and we are part of the OECS Commission. These webinars are really intended to be an opportunity for practitioners in the creative industries to engage in conversations on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the creative economy. We started a week ago. We focused on music and entertainment in the first webinar. The second one was just 2 days ago. We focused a lot on the fashion and design sector. And today we are looking at the film, audiovisual and animation sector. Primarily, the idea is that in each of these webinars, we will hear from practitioners. Many of them have been long-standing in their respective disciplines. So this afternoon we have filmmakers, documentary makers, event planners and others who will speak to us about how this pandemic has affected them and their livelihoods and their ability to generate revenue and to keep themselves going. And the second area is, of course, looking at how we can reset our sector moving forward. So what it is that we can do at the firm level, at the micro level, to in fact get us up to speed and ensure that once this thing is over, not just now, but of course the next 6 months, the next 2 to 3 years, what are the kinds of things that we need to do? And also at the policy level, at the macro level, what are some of the policy implications moving forward? This is an opportunity really for us to focus a lot on how the region, and of course the world, but the region in this particular instance, what we need to do to in fact ensure that artists and practitioners in the creative sector really get the kind of attention they deserve. So this is what we have done in putting these webinars together. And I can tell you that we've had some really exciting and rich engagements over the last couple of weeks. And so we expect the same thing this afternoon, I'm sure. With the kind of panelists that we have gathered this afternoon, we expect to have a lot of really interesting conversations. We have panelists from out of St. Lucia, we have from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica, and of course our neighbor in the French West Indies, Guadeloupe. We have the Film Commissioner of the Guadeloupe. So we are very, very pleased to have assembled such an impressive list of panelists to address us this afternoon to lead the conversation. So without much ado, I'll come back from time to time just to say that we have also on the call Mr. Ricardo James, who is the officer in charge of the CBU, and I'm going to get him to say a few words before we get started. Ricardo.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this, as Sobers mentioned, our third in the series of webinars that the CBU has organized to have a discussion and a dialogue on the impact of COVID-19 on the creative sector. This is the objective of this exercise is for us to remain engaged with our stakeholders, with our clients, to hear from you on what are the challenges that you have been facing as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and the measures that have been taken to fight this virus. As I'm saying this, I'm hoping that everyone, well, I can see the panelists, but I'm hoping everyone who is participating is also safe and sound and following all of the various social distancing protocols and guidelines. We do not know how long we're going to be in this current situation. We do not know when borders are going to be reopened. We do not know how long we're going to have to remain standing 6 feet apart if we are inside. And so, you know, we've been hearing a lot of new words, new buzzwords as a result of this crisis. And new normal is one of them. It's not a new term, but it certainly has taken a new meaning when we think about what the world is going to look like in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or maybe even a year. And all of that will depend on whether or not we have an effective vaccine in place. In terms of the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and on business, I think we can imagine what it has been. The shutdown of productive activity, whether it's in manufacturing or services, has meant that businesses are no longer earning an income. They are not generating revenue. They have had to send staff home. Probably they are not being able to meet their commitments, whether it's financial commitments, etc. And the impact would be different and have certain nuances depending on the type of industry you're in. If you're a manufacturer, that means you're not producing, you may not be able to sell and distribute your product. In the creative sector, maybe production is not being affected so much, but it also depends. If you're producing film, certainly you are not able to produce, to shoot. But if you're writing, if you're doing the creative process, you are probably still able to do that in front of your computer and to write a film or music piece or draw or design a dress or fashion piece. But what we would want to hear today is how has COVID-19 impacted on the film and audiovisual and animations sector. This is one of the focus areas of the CBU's work in the creative industries, where we are seeking to build competitiveness, develop the practitioners, the enterprises, to facilitate and encourage trade and export. So what does that mean for us moving forward in this current pandemic? How do we need to adjust our programs? How do we need to develop our activities and projects? What are sort of some of the support and assistance that you, the practitioners, are going to need now and in the future? What opportunities are there, have you recognized from such a crisis? Because usually crisis not only are negative, but sometimes they are positive that can be found in terms of opportunities. So it would be useful also to hear from the discussions, what are the opportunities that you have identified and you have already started taking advantage of. So we hope from the discussions that we can glean and gather very insightful and useful information, recommendations that would help guide us, as we plan at the CBU, our work moving forward. So let me just end here now, because this is about hearing from you, the panelists, as well as from the participants. Let me just thank everyone on the panel for agreeing to participate and to wish us a very successful next 2 hours in our dialogue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ricardo, and putting this thing into perspective for us as we move forward in today's discussion. Already I can see that we are joined by quite a number of persons representing various interests. We have people representing business support organizations. I recognize the presence of Rayan from the CARICOM Secretariat. Rayan, it's good to have you this afternoon. We also have people from a number of the subsectors of the film and animation subsector. And so we are pleased that we have so many of you here this afternoon. We also have a couple film commissioners and film commissions represented here this afternoon. I recognize Eloise from Auto Curacao and Daphne Vidal from Dominica. And so we are really excited and pleased to have so many of you here this afternoon. I see we have people from Trinidad and Tobago as well, from Texas in the United States, and from other parts of the region. So it's really great to have so many of you here this afternoon, and we're looking forward to an exciting afternoon discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce our moderator this afternoon. Our moderator is from St. Lucia. His name is Kendall John. Kendall is the president of the St. Lucia Audiovisual and Film Association. That association is probably one of the few associations that have been functioning in the OECS space. And they have been very active in bringing together professionals and practitioners in the sector together over many years. And so we are pleased that Kendall has agreed to moderate this conversation. And I know that he's familiar with most of the other panelists. So this afternoon, let me just welcome Kendall and to give him the opportunity to take us through to the conversation over the next couple hours. Kendall, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for allowing me to be the moderator on this very important discussion. Good afternoon to all. thank you for joining us. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the film, audiovisual and animation sector and measures for re-engaging the sector to a sustainable future. The format of this discussion will be as follows. We have 5 very experienced and qualified participants, panelists, active within the audiovisual sector throughout the OECS, who will firstly share their personal experience during the pandemic, what was or is the impact on their personal businesses and on the audiovisual sector in whichever country they are based. After which we'll open the discussion to the first round of question and answers to our participants. Participants will be asked to put their questions on the chat and to raise their hands if they wish to ask a question or to make a comment. Subsequent to this activity, we'll be again engaging our panelists who will speak to measures they think need to be taken to reopen their activities in the sector and to sustain long-term growth in the aftermath of the pandemic. A second round of questions and answers will follow, and then we'll wrap up today's webinar. Okay, so I'll start with a little introduction to set the context. Of course, a pandemic of this magnitude is something that historically happens approximately once every 100 years. And so to think that we could have and should have been prepared for this would be highly unrealistic. While we as the Caribbean have managed the health challenges fairly well in comparison to our more affluent counterparts to the north, even being touted on BBC News recently as an example to other countries as to how to manage and contain such a health crisis, we are still bracing for the full brunt of the economic repercussions to this pandemic. Many businesses are already feeling the impact, having to resort to forced staff leave, staff rotation, and layoffs to manage their expenditures. The audiovisual sector is no different, and many TV stations and self-employed producers are beginning to feel the financial strain. I personally wear 2 hats. I am the production manager at a TV station, and I also own a small audiovisual production business, and so I am well aware of the current media environment. But before we hear the personal experiences of our panelists during this pandemic, I want to ensure that this is not an all doom and gloom prognosis. I sincerely believe in a quote by one of my favorite authors, Paulo Coelho, who wrote, and I quote, "Life always waits for some crisis to occur before revealing itself at its most brilliant," end of quote. And so while we initially will discuss our current, albeit difficult situation, we want to ultimately discuss the inherent opportunities that will arise from this crisis. How can we reset the audiovisual sector, if you will, both on the micro and macro level? How can we pivot our business as audiovisual producers to come out stronger? Is this pause we have been asking for of our tourism-driven economies for our Caribbean governments and policymakers to at least acknowledge the figurative hand of the creative sector in the back of the class? Should we really be putting all our eggs in the tourism basket? There are many other points to discuss, but now I'll go on to introducing our esteemed panelists who have very kindly agreed to share their personal experiences and viewpoints of the sector at this juncture. Our panelists are Dale Elliott, founder and managing director of the independent film company Incorporated of St. Lucia and producer of the well-known documentary series Untold Stories. We have Tolga Akchali, filmmaker of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and a writer and director of the recently released film Too Licorice. I was so looking forward to seeing that in St. Lucia. Hopefully you'll see it soon in the cinemas. We have Anita Bully, former film commissioner of the Commonwealth of Dominica and production manager with Caz Creole Production and Caribbean Theatre Network, recent producers of Orsay and the Masqueraders. Tony Coco Violin, film commissioner of Guadeloupe and vice president of the Caribbean Audiovisual Network. And of course, we have Milton Edison Branford, managing director of Malfini Film and Animation Studio, Incorporated, St. Lucia. Welcome to all our panelists, and we look forward to an interesting and engaging discussion. I'm going to start with Mr. Dale Elliott, if you don't mind. I know he doesn't like to be put on the spot, but I'll just say a few things about Dale. I think many persons already know of some of the things he's done. Dale Elliott is a St. Lucian journalist and communication specialist. He's also the founder and managing director of the independent film company The company's pièce de résistance is a social transformation and behavioral change documentary series entitled Untold Stories. There are currently approximately 130 documentaries covering an extensive range of topics. So he's one of the most prolific documentary makers in the Caribbean, I would say. He's also the creative director of numerous engaging communication strategies, television commercials, and PSAs. He also received several awards, the most notable of which are the coveted People's Choice Award from the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce, 2019, Prime Minister's Award for Innovation from the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce, 2016, and Most Outstanding Journalist from the Caribbean Congress of Community Practitioners in Barbados, 2016 and 2015. So, Mr. Dale Elliott, I mean, the first question, of course, would be, in this new dispensation during the COVID-19 pandemic, how have you been coping? What have you been doing differently to survive this, both financially and otherwise, as an audiovisual practitioner?
Good day. Thank you, Kendall, for the introduction, and good day to the other panelists. A special hello to Anita Bully. Special hello. The 2020 has thrown everybody on his head, and for us, it has been a little bittersweet. My first love is the documentary series Untold Stories. My first love. However, from the beginning of the pandemic, we saw the opportunities in this crisis. There would have been a need for public relations or communication, even advertising during this time in a very strategic way. PSAs, we didn't get a chance to do much of it, but we had to change our model just a little bit. So let me start first with Untold Stories. This thing came in the middle of our season 9 of series, where we were ready to go out to television. We had some really engaging programs, and some of them were time sensitive. And in the middle of it, we had to stop for 2 reasons. One, everybody, all advertisers for long form television called and said, please put my ad on hold, which, I mean, just brought everything down to an absolute standstill. If you don't have advertisers, you can't go to air. So that was the number one challenge. Secondly, with the production of other documentaries, even if we had interviews planned, the world stopped and we couldn't go 6 feet close to anybody else. So that was a second challenge. One of the things I was very eager to do was a documentary that would more or less chronicle the story of COVID right through. That proved near impossible. Even today, I am trying to do it. And everybody from my children to the CMO says, Dale, you're on your own. The fear, though, is that if we're not there to capture that story, who is? Who's going to capture the people in quarantine? Their stories. Their stories when they come out of quarantine. The people who were diagnosed and have gone through treatment and are now COVID-free. The policymakers who were stumbling with this novel situation. The economic grouping that continue to be varied and affected. Who's going to be there to tell that comprehensive story? But if you can't tell the story of the infected, it's going to be very, very difficult down the line to tell the story of how COVID has affected people on an economic level across the region, from St. Lucia and across the region. So that in itself was an absolute challenge. For me, I wanted to tell the COVID story more from the patient's perspective than anything else. It's their story at that time. I haven't found a way to do that yet, sadly. The gem in all of this came through Digicel, our long-standing client. Since we had a sabbatical from documentaries, now we had to produce content for some of the other companies. And Digicel from very early started a campaign there for you. And so a lot of the television commercials for St. Lucia and quite a few other countries in the region, we produced them from scratch. So that was a novel opportunity, and it was a learning curve. One thing I did find though was a million other producers in the world were thinking along the very same lines. So even ads that we scripted totally in St. Lucia, in our little zone, 4 days later, a company in Detroit will release a similar commercial and with 14 words that we used. I thought it was absolutely, absolutely amazing. And had it been the other way around, somebody would have said, we copied them. But it was absolutely amazing. It has given us an opportunity, though, to regroup as a company. So productions that would have taken us a week and a half, perhaps, this situation has forced us to produce it in 24 to 48 hours, stretching our strength. And I guess there's not much else happening. However, just being able to pull these productions together. Let me give you an example. One PSC, 59 seconds with 15 different personalities in St. Lucia, and given a mandate of 48 hours to find them, get the clip, get it out on television in 48 hours. That was, for me, that was a game changer. And if anything I will take from this entire experience, it is how to organize, cost, and move on. Very, very, very helpful. We have struggled, like everybody else, financially, even if the workload has increased significantly because of a few clients who have specific tasks that they need done. Their accounts departments have been on hiatus.
Oh, man.
But it's going through the motions. It is really going through the motions. To date, knock on wood, we have not had to lay off or any of our staff, and that is mostly due to our plans. It has given us a chance, though, to what we can capture that will be used later on for productions in retrospect. For example, our border situation, for the first time ever, a country having to be split in half. Perfectly empty streets, or a drive around the island at 2 o'clock in the morning or at 11 o'clock in the night with absolutely no traffic. I don't think anybody can, maybe since the 70s, would have been able to film something like that and do it in a time-lapse version. So we've taken the time to create films and pieces that 1 year from now, when we look back at this, we're like, I'm happy that somebody captured it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It does give you an opportunity to really do things that you wouldn't have normally done. And so that's the beauty of it, and the opportunity to talk about.
One of the things also, Kendall, this truly showed us the power of social media versus conventional television. We have seen an absolute burst for our documentary series, the viewership online, because people were at home. And we went from maybe 30,000 views, 40,000 views in a week to, in the same period, having nearly 80,000 to 100,000 views. So that was very encouraging. And out of over 100 and something documentaries that we had prepared over the years, we only loaded maybe 40 or 50 of them. So it gave us the opportunity to load a new documentary every 2 or 3 days. And the viewership has been astonishing. Absolutely, absolutely astonishing. And then when we look at the stats of who's watching and where and what amount of the content that they're watching, we're very surprised that the average person is watching 34 to 38 minutes per documentary. And that's all over the world. That was very, very surprising.
That's very good. Again, platforms like Netflix became the mainstay during this pandemic. And I also wanted to know how the Caribbean platforms such as Studio Anansi.tv and the Caribbean Tales-TV.com, how they fared. I am hoping somebody would be able to tell us where that is concerned. What are your thoughts regarding that?
It would have been nice for me to go to one platform to watch Caribbean content, especially in this time as we have some downtime. It would be nice to see what other filmmakers. I can't think of one place to go if I wanted to watch Hamas films or people out of Barbados or out of Trinidad, save and except for YouTube. And most creators don't load their fresh work there. So this would have been an absolutely awesome time for it.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you very much, Dale. And I guess we'll be hearing from you very soon. We'll go on to Miss Anita Bully. Anita Bully, of course, is from Dominica and is a cultural industries consultant. She's worked in the theater arts for a number of years, first in Dominica and then in Jamaica. And during her tenure in Jamaica, Anita taught part-time at the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts. She was also the coordinator of a special project for the Jamaican chapter of women in film and television entitled Inspire and Educate. In 2003, was instrumental in getting Disney to film parts of the sequels to Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl in Dominica, and Mark Burnett Productions to film the 13-part series Pirate Master in Dominica the following year. Anita worked as a cultural industries consultant and film commissioner to Dominica, a post to which she was appointed in 2006, which ended in December 2012. She's a founding member and board member of the Caribbean Audiovisual Network, CAN, the vice chair of the Audiovisual Association of Dominica. And she's presently production manager and financial controller of Cal Square Productions and Caribbean Theatre Network. Their last film, OCE and The Masqueraders, has been shown at film festivals in Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Belize, Martinique, Guyana, and Toronto, Canada. Hello, Miss Anita Bully.
Hi, how are you? That's not my picture there, okay?
Yes, Miss Bully, can you, Miss Bully, just tell us a little bit about what it's been like during this pandemic? What have your production companies been engaged in to survive this crisis? And of course, what opportunities you have seen during this as well?
I prepared something on, that's not my picture there, by the way, okay? I prepared something on the effects of COVID-19 internationally and then looked at the Caribbean region. And so I'm going to go through that very quickly.
No problem.
Because I think it's important to know what is going on internationally and that we are not as badly off, okay? COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has had a major impact on the audiovisual and film sector worldwide. The cinemas and movie theaters have been closed, festivals have been canceled or postponed, and film releases have moved to future dates or been postponed indefinitely. This, of course, has caused major drops in box office sales, and they talk about losing billions of dollars in, you know, a short space of time. Of course, streaming has become the order of the day, and we are noticing where the stock of film exhibitors have dropped dramatically. Hundreds of films originally scheduled to be released this year has been postponed or canceled, and film production has been halted. I have a list of projects that have been halted, which you'll be getting in the presentation. And major films, you know, blockbuster films have been canceled, including the James Bond film, John Wick Chapter 4, etc. And it's not only happening in North America, the Chinese film industry has been hit bad, so has the Indian film industry, Bollywood, and stocks of those companies have dropped drastically. The impact of film festivals regionally, many of the festivals and the events have been canceled or postponed regionally. Our film was supposed to show at Nouveau Regard Film Festival in Guadeloupe, which is scheduled for end of April, but that was officially canceled. Timari Film Festival in Guyana was moved back 1 week, and it is going to be aired online. Haroun Film Festival in St. Vincent and the Grenadines was canceled, and Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival is still on schedule for September, but we don't know what's going to be happening later on. Internationally, number of film festivals canceled, okay? The impact on production is really, really, really high. The key productions in outbreak zones have changed the schedule, they've changed the location, or shut down completely. It started with Mission Impossible, which was being filmed in Venice. The crew was sent home right away, and all the sets were left there. After Tom Hanks got infected with COVID in Australia, the whole crew was put on quarantine, okay, and the production was shut down. And we have Dominicans working on Amazing Race and Survivor season 41 and 42. And this was scheduled to begin shooting in Fiji in March. They postponed it to a later date and eventually had to cancel. Now on that project alone, 400 crew members have been affected by the cancellation, okay? But there are new opportunities with persons at home. The popularity of online streaming services is on an increase. Non-blockbuster films are being streamed much earlier now than they would have been in normal circumstances, as people want to make sure that they are in the network. And we see new films coming out on Netflix every day, on Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and video on demand, okay? In the Caribbean, the scene is definitely no different. Cinemas have been closed down, regional festivals are canceled or postponed, film production has been brought to a halt. I was talking to Hammer Films today, and their new production, Deep Blue, still has a crowd scene and some minor scenes with a lead actor out of Toronto to shoot. Of course, with COVID-19, this can be done. They're waiting to get clearance from the authorities to shoot the crowd scene, and they're waiting for international travel to open so that they could bring down the actor. Some pre-production and post-production can continue, as we said. Now is the opportunity to get our scripts written, break down our scripts, do some storyboarding, do our costume and set design. If we have film shot, it's a good opportunity to edit in peace and quiet, get our soundtrack developed, put in our special effects, etc. However, social distancing makes shooting a taboo because we have curfew restrictions as well as other restrictions in terms of the numbers of people that can be anywhere. It's difficult to go scouting locations. People don't want you to use their locations and bring in COVID to them. Filming on location, people are really the public locations are locked down there. So you find that if you had to shoot a scene somewhere, that would be difficult. Even on a set, disinfecting before, after, during, for each take and retake would be a nightmare, near impossible and costly. So as a result, things have come to a total standstill. Screening of films is a major problem because the movie theaters are now shut down. When they are reopened, we know that the seating capacity will be cut back, and that's going to affect income and box office sales. It will also take a while for persons to be comfortable being in a crowded room with other persons who may be infected for 90 minutes or more, because a feature film is 90 minutes. And unless the situation changes, this will really make it unprofitable to screen one's film. As a result, you find producers postponing the release of their film. There are new opportunities, however, for screening of films, because we have done quite a bit on the festival circuit. However, there's Facebook Live, the online premiere of Uncivilized, which is the personal documentary shot by Michael Lees, will be premiering on Third Horizon Film Festival this Saturday at 4 p.m. Okay, and it will also be on YouTube, and that's a Dominica film that is making waves everywhere. Studio Nancy by CAFA, Caribbean Film Academy, and Third Horizon is building their catalog of Caribbean films, which can be viewed online. Coming soon to Studio Nancy are 4 Caribbean films, one of them being Osei and the Masqueraders from Dominica, Adero from Guyana, Angela from Cuba, and Caroni from Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival has played their parts because they've created what is called Watch a Movie. And they have shown 14 films over 14 days between the period March 28th to April 10th. And they now have a second wave of Watch a Movie, which will be on every Sunday between May 24th and July 12th, where one can watch one of Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival's favorite movies, so movies that have made it at the festival. Funding for productions. Local funding in most Caribbean islands is limited to non-existent, and more so now, as funds are being diverted to deal with the COVID crisis in most islands. And producers need to recoup their costs. So we have to come up with a way where some costs can be recouped, if not all, but at the same time, you don't want your film to get lost along the wayside with all these new films coming out, and we don't have Caribbean films going. The new trends that are in place is something which we need to look at. We know the television industry has adapted to reaching audiences from their home. You see that with the news anchors, with the talk show hosts, and even with music shows and competitions, which you would have thought would have been nearly impossible. We see musicians from all over the world getting together and producing music videos. I mean, Mikel Anderson of Dominican fame was in a video with how many people? Close to 100 persons, you know? Everyone is getting creative and creating pieces in a number of areas, including comedy. And I mean, we see it on YouTube every day, somebody's sending you a little video of some funny thing where people are trying out a thing, okay? We have to look at what we call what is being touted as the new normal. Will we now also be going to watch movies at home and online only? Is that going to be our new normal? We in the Caribbean will therefore have to come together and look at ways we can overcome the present situation and still produce Caribbean films, telling our stories with the limited funds that we have. I hope this was very informative, okay? And I thought it necessary to put it in the context of what is happening globally as well as regionally, so that we can see we're not different, but we have the opportunity to do something that is very productive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bully. Very comprehensive and informed as expected. You did say about your movie, and it was supposed to be doing some screenings, but it's also supposed to be launched on Studio Nancy,
Yes, it's going to start on Studio Nancy, hopefully by the beginning of next month.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so y'all can watch out for it online. And they do have quite a number of films. And Dale was asking, you know, where can he see only Caribbean films? Yes, only Caribbean films on that website. Okay, so you can go onto their website and check it out and see what films you can watch. I know they do have where you pay a minimal cost of maybe $1 US, $5 US. But now with this COVID thing, I think they're changing to accommodate the audiences, the Caribbean audiences. So we may see some changes on that platform.
Okay, we're looking forward to that. I know Studio Nancy and Caribbean Tales, I think is the other one that plays Caribbean films only. So I guess we can start looking at targeting those spaces. They've been about also creating a Caribbean chapter in Netflix, since African population has been very effective in getting their stories told and been using Netflix platform. I don't know if we have the numbers to equate and rival Africa. I don't know if the diaspora is large enough for Netflix to look at us in that regard, but it's still something to consider as well.
Yes, definitely. And I was talking to Michael Lees about his film Uncivilized, and if he was getting it on Netflix, and he was saying he had a problem because with Netflix, you have to have a special, I think it's 4H quality. You have to have a special quality, and the film has to be around for a while before they accept it.
Okay, okay.
So he preferred to do it with Studio Nancy.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right, so we'll now move on to Mr. Tolga Akchali. He's, of course, the director of the very popular film Two Licorice. That's a Barbadian action comedy feature film. It was written and directed by himself. And he had regional celebrities, Alison Hines, King Bubba, and Hypersounds acting in the film as well. It premiered in 4 countries, where it was the #1 film in Barbados box office for 6 weeks, beating both X-Men, Dark Phoenix, and Godzilla. So that was no mean feat. It also was nominated by the New York International Film Festival for Best Fiction Film, and of course was edged out by The Astronaut. Of course, there was a disparity in the budget. The Astronaut had a budget of 320,000 EC, and Two Licorice had a budget of 10,000 EC. So it was a case of David versus Goliath, and of course Goliath just edging him out at this time. I still want to find out how exactly he got a film done for 10,000 EC, but we'll talk a little more about that. Also, he's earned 3 nominations in South of France, Best Comedy Movie, Best Lead Actress, and the nomination for Best Director. Sadly, this all-expense paid trip to France has been postponed due to COVID-19. So we want to welcome Tolga. And of course, the question is, and of course we can see that you're just riding the wave of the very popular Two Licorice. In St. Lucia, we're looking forward to seeing that film here. And unfortunately, that's when COVID-19 struck. So tell us a little about how COVID-19 has affected that particular undertaking, but also what have you been doing in the meanwhile to use your time wisely in production?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being on this panel for a very important subject. Special thanks to Miss Anita Bully for pretty much explaining all of my own research, what I was about to tell. But I'll just speak from my personal experience, because Miss Anita Bully has covered pretty much everything in the film industry so far, internationally and for the Caribbean. For Two Licorice, as your first question was, you wondered how we made the film for 10,000 EC. I had to convince the entire crew and cast to be part of this overambitious project. And we all shared the same dream, which was to make a feature film. And part of the deal was that they would receive shares of any profits earned if the film made money. It did in Barbados, as it ran for the 6 weeks. And we had a premiere opening in St. Vincent. And then we had a cinema deal where it was supposed to show for 2 weeks guaranteed and 3 weeks additionally if it would do well in the box offices in 4 cinemas. And unfortunately, that was a week before March 18th, which is when COVID-19 struck, causing all the cinemas to shut down and all of our potential revenue being completely canceled. So I did research and I decided to put the film on Vimeo.com's on-demand website. So if anyone goes to vimeo.com/on-demand/2licorice, they would be able to find the film where they could either buy or rent the film for $3.99 US or $1.99 US. Now we've had very nice international sales. We've been advertising to the Caribbean diaspora in the UK, New York, and Canada, and of course the Caribbean region. But the Caribbean region, unfortunately, 11,800 and something users have it in their cart ready for purchase, and 27,000 and something users have it in their cart ready for rent. And the reason why it stopped there is because either their credit cards aren't being accepted, or they don't have credit cards or Visa debit cards to facilitate the purchase in the beginning. And we've came up with this assumption because our Instagram and Facebook inbox channels flooded with interested audiences saying, please find a way for us to make alternative payments. Obviously, cash is unacceptable at the moment due to everywhere being closed, but a lot of people have suggested being able to pay with their phone credit. I've been speaking with Flo and Digicel, but they're both very interested in working with me. And I'm sure this can also be a huge benefit for the entire Caribbean film industry, where people can simply pay with their mobile phone and immediately have access to a film. But they all have their own issues at the moment. And I think my concerns are a bit lower on their list of things to do. And right now I'm going to enter the Turkish market because I'm half Turkish. So I'm hoping for some good exposure there, and I'll see how it responds to sales. As Miss Anita was saying, if you are in the post-production stage, focus on that. If you are in the pre-production stage, continue focusing on that. Increase your research, do your planning for your next productions. It's a sad place to be if you're about to shoot. It's very disheartening. I can imagine how it would feel, because just the idea of having to reschedule when I was shooting 2 Licorice because of a hurricane that was coming, it really threw off the entire crew and the cast. Could you imagine completely shutting down shooting because everywhere's on lockdown? And everyone's afraid and feeling lost because we don't know how we're going to be able to have access to our low budget locations, which is public areas or friends' homes or hotels, because we're not necessarily involved in their day-to-day business. Based on my experience, it's usually a agreed favor from someone that allows us to let us use their location. Now, I'm not so sure if people would be interested in having a team of actors and actresses and crew running around the place to get shots and interrupting their business flow. And in any case, there will be a solution at the end of the day. And even if it is that we're going to have to shoot wearing masks, it will be part of our day-to-day living, and film is a reflection of reality. So it wouldn't be a big deal to see cast wearing the masks in film, because it's part of life, if it does become the norm. So that's my answer so far for that question.
I must say it's very interesting when it comes to the concept of having persons pay using their phones. I know Africa has started using that for a while, use of credit on the phones to do transactions. So that's really something, and you might be breaking new ground there, and you must keep us posted where that is concerned. I know a number of productions, especially for the TV station where I'm working, we have had interviews, and for a while we stopped, but then after that we just kind of done social distancing. We increased the length of the mic, or everybody wore their mask, and so some of our interviews we were able to continue some of these programs. Of course, a cast of maybe just, or crew might be just 2 people instead of having more than that out on a day. So I understand the challenges of trying to still do productions within the COVID environment. But are you working on something other than the promotion of your film, or are you working on a new script during this downtime, if you will?
Well, I'm behaving blindly to what may happen due to COVID. I'm writing a script as if nothing is going to change.
Okay.
I may have to change that, but I fell in love with my story so much to the point that I'm convincing myself that things are going to go back to normal. And outside of that, I'm just working on the promotional content right now for the Turkish market.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kendall, your mic is muted. Kendall, your mic is muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry, my bad. Okay, got it. Yeah, sorry. We're now going to reach out to Mr. Milton Branford of Malfini Theatre, and of course, Malfini Animation Studio, Film and Animation Studio. Mr. Milton Branford, of course, has been working in theatre for many years. He's done a number of productions for both Carnival and for theatrical productions, including Roderick Walcott and all the rest. So we also have him now working with Malfini Film and Animation Studio, which is really a company designed to educate young animators and produce local folklore, culture, and dramatic films through animation. And so, as we're running a little behind schedule, I want to cut to the chase and speak to him a little directly. Of course, we also have to mention that Malfini has a formal arrangement with Toon Boom Animation Incorporated, which is the software, 2D animation software. And the studio has been licensed to Toon Boom Animation, and there's an official Toon Boom authorized training center for St. Lucia. Mr. Milton Branford, could you just let us have an insight into how the pandemic has affected your dealings, especially for animation? I know also with your tutoring, there might be a little more of a challenge than others when it comes to having your workers within close proximity of each other. So tell us a little bit how that pandemic has affected your institution.
Hilton needs to unmute his mic.
He's not hearing his mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Okay, great.
Right.
I was saying thank you, Kendall. Happy to be here. And I was also saying I want to send out blessings to all the creatives who have joined us today. My team and I wish that you all remain safe throughout this difficult period. I want to tip my hat, as usual, to Madam Bully there. She did a fantastic job. As Toga said, she said some of the things that I know a number of us would be saying, given that information. She's very thorough, and I think I won't go into any of those areas that she has already touched. I'll just say no one could have seen this coming. The speed at which this developed, the global impact and the disruption to workflow in particular, along with the uncertainty, was and continues to be unprecedented. For us, the ensuing lockdown brought our workflow to a halt for at least 2 weeks. Because we are a traditional multi-seat brick and mortar studio, our licenses are all relegated to our on-site network, and we carry very, very few standalones. One sec, let me just switch this off. Okay. The immediate problem for us was equipping our team members to be able to transition to a work-at-home scenario. Fortunately, our relationship with Toon Boom Animation paid great dividends. And I must say, one of the things that we did from day one was to establish that we do not use bootleg software. The reason for not doing that is that the service, the assistance and the relationship with companies like Toon Boom work very well at times like these. So, they move very quickly, Toon Boom, to quickly offer all their clients free at-home standalone licenses to assist. That would have been a tremendous problem for us if we didn't get that, as a matter of fact. This solved a critical problem, as Harmony is the principal 2D software that we use at Malfini. We then had to move some of our backup equipment, backup hardware, to the team members' homes. Those who did not have the necessary equipment to keep them working from home, we had to move our equipment over to them, set it up for them, and get them going that way. That's why it probably took us about 3 weeks before we actually got the system down. The next hurdle was communication and asset sharing. And for this, we sort of experimented with a few platforms that we were familiar with, and finally settled on Discord for meetings and Skype as backup, Google Docs for file and doc sharing, and we also looked at Trello as well. Now, the thing about it is Malfini's team thrive on the studio environment, right? So where idea exchanges, real-time critiques and suggestions help to move projects along much quicker than the delay of scheduled review meetings that, you have this sort of back and forth, and you have the time delay and that sort of stuff. So, so there was some reduction in productivity and lost time without the established systems of efficient remote working conditions, but that was an acceptable situation based on the time, what happened, the way this thing happened. And we know that there are some great software tools we suggest that you can use to solve some of these project management requirements, such as Shotgun or Toon Boom Director, but good tools cost. And not all of us are able to acquire these as permanent inclusions to our production software arsenal. So as most of us do, we sometimes use available free platforms. In situations like this, however, free platforms may lack some features, forcing us to make a few workarounds. But that's what happens in the situation like this. I was asked, in terms of demand for work, what our situation was. the volume and demand for work, I tend to believe that this period may actually drive up the demand for animation. As we all spoke about earlier about the restrictions and difficulties of live action production, and we also note that PSAs in response to COVID-19 has peaked globally. Additionally, so many folks are around the world at home watching television, and there's a huge demand now, an increasing demand for content. And I think that animation really will fit in there nicely. It will develop to that point where there will be a lot more content required, animation content required. Currently, we're working on projects that I'm trying to go quickly because I know we lost time. We're working on projects that we were working on prior to COVID-19. We're also working with the Ministry of Health in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and developing PSAs, etc. We have some projects out of for Belize, for instance, and we're just wrapping that up. The questions and concerns are basically security issues with the system as it is now, where there's questions of the integrity of home systems of the animators who work at home. Systems have been known to go down and files lost or corrupted and requiring work previously completed to be redone, causing additional loss of time, etc. So we sort of trying to get all of that into, get a handle on all of that. It may not be perfect at this point, but it's early days yet, and we'll power on. What I just to point this out before I quickly close so that we can move on, because I think we need to get to the discussion part. And I must say that this, in my opinion, has given us all a chance to press the reset button and to look at key operational gaps as well as inter-studio relationships. And I say that again, inter-studio relationships, communication, capacity development, mitigation, and sustainability, both on a micro and a macro level. Right? It is my personal view that we need to relinquish some of the inherent competitive and insular culture that seems to entrenched in the region, and to begin to see what we need to have begin to see the need to have a more collaborative and approach to growing the region's animation industry. Around this time, I kind of get a little excited because for the last 6 years, I've been preaching around the Caribbean that animation studios need to really collaborate. We need to pool our resources together in order for us to compete on the global marketplace. And we have this situation where, animation studios don't necessarily wish to collaborate. They don't see the value in that. And I think we need to discuss that, as well as we need to discuss the overall support that we're getting from local and regional organizations, governments, and organizations like that. So I hope we can actually start that discussions on those issues and see how we can work out coming out of this COVID and moving together as one.
Thank you, Milton. Again, because of the time, I wouldn't go into any questions. I'll just go on to our next panelist, our last panelist, but by no means least. He is from Guadeloupe. He's trained in arts and communication. That's Tony Coco Villouin. He has 30 years experience as filmmaker and lecturer. He has worked in Europe, Africa, Indian Ocean, in the private sector and for governments and civil society. He returned to the Caribbean in 2000. Tony has focused on the restructuring and development of the audiovisual industry in his native Guadeloupe. His initial efforts led to the establishment of the Cinematographic and Audiovisual Trade Union of Guadeloupe in 2001. In April 2008, he was appointed as the first film commissioner of Guadeloupe. In addition, his core responsibilities as film commissioner, promoting Guadeloupe as a film location for international productions and facilitating the production of both local and international content. He has also established several programs to encourage professional development and collaboration between filmmakers in Guadeloupe and the Caribbean. Welcome, Mr. Tony. Again, we're looking at Guadeloupe, and we know there's more of a connection there between Europe, but also there exists a strong connection to the Caribbean. We want to know how the pandemic affects the Guadeloupean film industry, the film sector, and what's your take on going forward and pivoting during this pandemic?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kendall, dear colleagues, dear Caribbeans. Thank you for this meeting, which prove we are willing to face with our future. Our future. I hope you and your family resist to any disease for a long time again. The current worldwide health challenge affects the filming industry, and we are planning for a COVID business recovery. To date, we count 155 cases of coronavirus in Guadeloupe since the first case declared on March 13. 13 people have died since the start of the pandemic in Guadeloupe. 2,866 PCR, polymerase chain reaction test has been made on the territory. Among the confirmed cases, three patients are still currently hospitalized in intensive care at the hospital in Guadeloupe, and 113 people are declared recovered. The last epidemiological bulletin confirms a weak circulation of the virus for several weeks on our territory. We continue to be vigilant for the reset of activities in the presence of the virus. We take care to respect and enforce the barrier measures in order not to favor new chains of contamination. For this reason, our territory is classified now in green, but we still apply the quarantine for all travelers arriving in Guadeloupe under the control of the authorities. Regarding our film industry, it is a real tsunami that it is shaking the entire profession, whether locally or nationally. It is indeed alongside our colleagues from all the French regions that we've been working for several weeks to find together answers to the many questions that arise today when it comes to resuming our production activities. I propose to quickly go over the important points raised as well as the actions implemented to obtain from our government or the authorizations allowing our professionals to resume the path of work, taking into account this health crisis far from being over. To date, still no agreement has been found with insurers and in our professions, as well as the bodies in charge of public health or the labor code in France, which blocks any resumption of filming activities in sufficient sanitary conditions. We expect a strong message from the President of the Republic, Mr. Macron, on June 2nd. A first sheet presenting the points necessary to consider for the resumption of activities reports 84 precautions almost impossible to take at the time we speak, and especially we museums, which are not unanimous in all sectors of the industry: direction, stage management, set decoration, props, category, makeup artists or actors. We asked our technicians to disregard all the information circulating concerning these conditions of recovery until everyone agrees. Criminal responsibilities being important at this time on this topic in France and therefore with us in Guadeloupe. We can see many impacts on our businesses, and we don't have time here to detail, unfortunately, everything, but we hold daily meetings with our technicians and artists to inform them and of the situation, as well as the developments are already fixed on certain practices, such as for example, the possible deletion or modifications of the contains, the lunch break on the film sets, much like in the US way, which is a revolution for French people. because this part of the day of the filming of the process is a very critical part in the culture, I mean, of filming in France. Production costs are increasing between 20 and 30% for TV series and feature films. For example, the Death in Paradise series for its season 10, season 10 is this year, which should restart in July, requires at least 200,000 masks, around 120,000 euros only for this part. I'm not talking about hydroalcoholic or blah, 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 and the orders and gloves and all that, just in terms of masks. It's something really huge. And doing as before by adding new difficulties is not the choice made for the moment on our territory, but rather to reinvent and adopt new behaviors. We know that the actors are the most fragile to protect, and that it is now necessary to manage the fear of the other, including for productions that come from red zones. Because, you know, in France, within France, we have various area and zones, green zones, orange zones, and red zones. Today, it's difficult and inadvisable to consider filming improvising. You have to learn not to come on a set when you have a little cold on the pretext that the film must be showed by all means necessary, or that it's changing now. We must change these ways of thinking and learn to work with a COVID referent, what we call a COVID ID now. It's an obligation for us now. Right now, how to deal with an actor coming on set with a mask and knowing that we have no right to send him back. TV series cannot shoot more than one set per day according to the agreements made with technicians till now in France, including Guadeloupe. The French West Indies, we still call them like that. You have to multiply the staff and reduce the contacts. It's a really deck now. The criminal responsibility of employees being strongly engaged. No shooting is thought today without health protocol. The two biggest difficulties that arise for productions are the management of filming locations due to overlapping schedules, as well as managing the availability of technicians. We therefore worked on the development of a platform that facilitates the organization of recruitment, especially for post-COVID resumption. At least, the local producers syndicate has launched an idea of co-production with the regional council support, including our film commission, to gather all skills and give an impulsion to a new age. Why not with the OECS? That's our hope, to find this collaboration and maybe launch again something, a dynamic that we had before. Just to ensure everybody that Guadeloupe is an area where we have 10 film festivals, okay? Nouveau Regard is one of them, which has been postponed, not really canceled, but postponed. We have no cancel till now, whatever we're talking about production or film festival. So we hope that we can maintain them, because it's not the end of everything. And we have concretely in France, including Guadeloupe, 100 projects postponed in terms of referring to filming. And what do I have to add? It's the COVID raises production costs by 20 of, yes, it's very major, 20 to 30%. What to add? Just sorry. And I notified the various information that you gave, like the film theaters are used now in France for film school. We use the theater now for film school in France, and naturally in Guadeloupe. It's a good idea for the Caribbean Film Academy, so I heard that. And Trinidad and Tobago watch a movie, it's a very good idea too. And I will go back on the platform Caribbean Contents, of course. And naturally, I notified too that the fact that people spend time in front of the TV more than ever, and I heard about this Netflix, interest. Now we are working with Georgia Slate University in Atlanta to establish like how to say that, a workshop to study what is the impact of the Netflix broadcasting on the world diaspora and Afro-Caribbean diaspora. Why? Because Guadeloupe, and Martinique is the second, and Guadeloupe is the third worldwide consumers of Netflix production in the world. We just have a real issue, because we see that like to a menace to our identity. That's why we are very interested, and that's why we have also to be very vigilant. Thank you for your attention, and for sure I stay here to pursue and gather all our reactions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Again, the Death in Paradise was actually one of the series that came to mind when I heard you coming from Guadeloupe, because I know it's one of the most popular series, British series, and I was wondering how that was affected by the pandemic, where he said, but he's still aiming for June, July. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge, but we'll see. All right.
We try for July, maybe at worst, and in September. But in September, we have others issue, like I say, because we have other technicians engaged already on other shooting.
Other productions. Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, thank you very much. We're now going to open the floor essentially to questions and comments by our participants. I'm sure you have a lot to discuss given what the panelists have said. And so feel free now to make whatever questions, have any questions or comments to the panelists, and let's see if we can address them. Before
we have Colin Wicks out of St. Lucia, and you know that Colin has been doing this youth film festival. So we asked to speak to us about that and how this period has impacted on the festival.
Hi, hello. Good. Hope you guys are hearing me.
Yes, we're hearing you. Loud and clear.
Hi. Yes. Well, Kendall, you know, we started this journey a long time ago, and first thing that came to mind was that I never knew there was always a challenge for us creative people to get our work done. So I think that is just another hurdle again that we have to face. So I just want to be a little optimistic about the future and say that we will always rise above, you know, what comes before us, because we are the creative minds, and this just brings another level of creativity to the fore. But with the film festival and where I am, like Dale said in the beginning, that actually I sort of had a contract penned on the Friday before the lockdown. So could you imagine that you get the green light on a Friday, and then on the Monday that you hear that it's no more, you know, so you have to start from scratch. So that's where we are. But however, going forward with the film festival, that you know, again, as I said, you have to be creative, you have to keep your head up, and that's where we have looked at. Basically, what we're going to be doing is looking to do the film festival online, to engage the young people online, get them to go out and produce. I mean, you obviously keeping all the stipulations in place, but I think that we could still manage a festival during the season. We would just have to be, as I said, creative about how we go about it. One of the things that we're looking at is to have them to actually speak on COVID. And what we have always tried to do with the festival is to use it to elevate the youth in terms of you know, their soft skills and so forth. So I think that what it will also do is that psychological outlet about COVID. And that's what we hope that this time around that we could do with the festival. Allow the young people to actually express their emotions, their views on what is happening to them, because I think that's a very important element that we cannot ignore, that the emotional and psychological effect that that it's going to have on not just the youth, but on all of us. And I think that film is an excellent outlet for this. So that's one of the reasons that we're going to look heavily in terms of producing during this time, because it will allow the young people to actually go out and express themselves through that medium, which is film. Outside of that, I think it's also opportunity to marry with other filmmakers across the Caribbean. As we said before, I think that there is a lot of opportunity for content, for Caribbean content. And I think we should take this as a time where we could come together and actually produce together for a Caribbean audience. Because I think what people are already seeing now is that they want to see more of themselves. They want to explore more of their uniqueness. And I think film could do that for us to bring us together in a stronger way. Actually, I see one of my colleagues from Trinidad here, Leslie, who has a film festival down in Trinidad, and we have been speaking about doing more collaborative stuff. And another aspect of it that we're looking at is actually a more educational. Since you guys know I'm heavily involved with youth and young people, that a series of programs where we would educate young people during this time, because as you know now school is out, so we have to look at ways of educating our young people and using again Caribbean content, Caribbean resources to be able to do so. So where you would have a lot of I would say Western culture being brought onto our shores, onto our screens, I think it's also opportunity for now us to look within us and our folk tales, which is what Leslie has. She runs a folk tale festival. All those indigenous things that allow us to grow as a people, that I think that we could tap into this now and use it during this period and actually have a change around. So where I understand that we're in a bind sort of right now, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand from that and grow in different directions. And that's what I'm hoping that this situation can do for us. It's, as I said, it's a new norm. We have to look at that, but outside of that, I think there is a lot of opportunity to move on from there.
And can I respond a little bit to Colin? Is that possible? Yeah. Yeah, I want to make a suggestion. I think we have a representative of CBU on the panel here, right? Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I recall
on the panel. No,
no.
I am from CBU. Mr. James is from CBU.
Ah, okay. Oh, great.
Yes.
At the AGM in Cuba a couple of years ago, which I attended.
Oh, you're talking about the Caribbean Broadcasting Union?
Union, yes.
Oh, no, we are not from Caribbean Broadcasting Union.
Ah, okay, okay.
We are from the OECS Competitive Business Unit.
Business Unit, okay, so that's a totally
No, we do not have
okay.
anybody from CBU.
Right. But I still would make the point that the CBU at the annual general meeting in Cuba, that was one of the subject matters that we brought to their attention in our presentation. And the fact that a lot of content within the region is not readily embraced and presented by the CBU members is something that we need to discuss. I mean, especially around this time when Dale was saying that there is no particular place he can go to get Caribbean film, that speaks a little badly about us and how we operate as far as our own creative our stories are concerned. I think that one of the things that can be discussed, I mean, maybe even from the point of the CBU, the business, is to have a discussion with the Caribbean Broadcasting Union and see what it is and how they can open up and begin to accept and some of the productions that we are doing regionally. Netflix is fine, but if we can't tell our own story to ourselves, you know, that's a little bit strange. I just wanted to make that suggestion on the, because I think CBU has to be involved in what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Kendall, we have somebody from who works with Digicel. I don't know if Elias want to talk to us a little bit about the Digicel.
Oh, Digicel has a thing, yeah.
Yeah, so Elias Dupi.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Dale, I believe is his name. I think you what you suggested was a really good idea, and from my knowledge, it's something that Digicel has been focused on and is working towards in the very near future, to bring a platform that will create a space, or should create a space, where the focus will really be on local stories, telling Caribbean stories, and telling and hosting, being able to host Caribbean films. I think as you've mentioned, Dale, that you were engaging with Digicel. I'm not sure what the conversations would have been, and with whom. But as a matter of fact, while we've been on this call, I made a call to the person who's sort of running that platform, and he also thinks that that is a fantastic idea. So it's something that we're going to aggressively pursue, at least from our perspective here in Dominica. We're going to try our best to see how we can incorporate some of the concerns that have been raised here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elias. And again, we're hearing talk of not a place that we can't go to a certain place to find our Caribbean, to hear our own stories. Again, I know of at least the two, but StudioNancy.tv and Caribbean Tales. Again, I don't know if they're doing sufficient marketing and promotion of themselves. So that's the reason a number of Caribbean people are not even aware that they exist. Of course, Netflix has a $1 million budget to promote themselves, and so maybe that's the difference. But then again, at the end of the day, maybe it's a case of we have to look at an alternative, or we assist those that already exist. But somehow, Caribbean people need to know there's a location, a place they can go to hear and see themselves.
Yep.
Mr. John, if I can have a word to say. Whoever manages to facilitate a platform that showcases Caribbean film that benefits both the audience and the filmmakers themselves, where the filmmakers are compensated financially for providing their content, and the content is at a high quality that the audience members who are financing it receive an enjoyable experience, there will be a fantastic union. But in order to achieve that, there needs to be an understanding of how payments from all across the islands are being sent. The biggest issue in the Caribbean is the lack of access to credit cards and Visa debit cards. In places like in Europe and in the US, where you receive spam mail with credit card offers with 4, 5, 6 options, to get one from your own bank that you've had an account with for over 5, 10 years plus, you have to go in with the same 2 IDs you went in with to open up in the beginning. And they make you feel like you're some sort of primary school student, and you apply for it in person, and you get your verification sent to you in a week or 2 if you qualify. It's absurd. So instead of waiting for these foreign banks to facilitate this, we should be working with Digicel or Flow or BTC or whichever Caribbean network solutions are available to process payments, because the banks are being they aren't facilitating our needs. And there is a need for Caribbean content. The reason why there isn't active fire is because there's no, there seems to be no drive behind it, because there's clearly an issue. Netflix, for example, like you're saying that Netflix has $1 million budget. It didn't always start like that. Netflix started because they had the facilities in place to push through to make where they have gotten to.
Kendall, we have two questions on the chat, so I don't know if you're aware of them. Hi, Kendall.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah. We have two questions. We have one from somebody from Jamaica who is asking, is there a Caribbean fund to assist, in place to assist with the production of Caribbean content? So that's the first question. Is there a fund to assist with production of Caribbean content? And the second question comes from Suzette Zedane. It's coming from the suggestion by Milton about getting CBU involved. She is saying that, however, broadcasting is a traditional medium. Would it not be better to keep thinking streaming? Any thoughts on this by the panelists? So there are two questions. One, whether there's a Caribbean fund, and the question about streaming in the new digital age. So your thoughts.
Yeah, well, can I say something on this? Yeah.
Okay, good.
I do agree that you have to look at the current situation with streaming. But what I'm saying here is that if you're not getting paid the way you would like to get paid, if you can at least begin through the Caribbean Broadcasting Union to get stuff out there, to me, it's not an either or situation. I think that both mediums can assist to get our stuff out there. People still watch television. They still go to cinemas. So I think that it's not an either or situation. But I take the point that maybe I should have mentioned something about the streaming thing as well. But as Togla says, there is the issue of how do you get paid. And I don't know the status of the Bitcoin situation right now in terms of whether we can handle that in the Caribbean. But isn't that something else that we can look at? Because I think eventually it's going to go there. It's all going to go into the digital domain. Does anybody know anything about the Bitcoin situation, whether it's an option?
I think Tony has a point that he wants to make. Tony, you want to talk about the server?
Yes, I was thinking about that. See, maybe if we collect some, because it's not very, very expensive, to have a server. I mean, maybe we can think out about this possibility to collect maybe some funding from the region, maybe through Interreg or the ACP, or I don't know what kind of funding, because we have several bridges to take and to catch money, when we are Caribbean and when we decide as Caribbean, being Caribbean, to do something together. For sure, we have they have money for that. There is money for that. But we can take an example, the workshop that we did suburbs with OECS about the writing workshop. We can imagine something maybe more longer, longer. Why not for a development phases of some projects, or why not for broadcasting or for production? I mean, we just have to know what kind of contents, maybe something like the Caribbean after the COVID. Something can be very simple to get this idea of say, what do we do after the COVID? Okay, we are willing to put our skills, our things together. We were sharing very recently about this idea of if we have a database, for instance, to know how many technicians we have in DR, how many technicians we have in Trinidad and Tobago, how many sound engineers in Dominica. But now it's not really, how do you say that? It doesn't really relevant. What is relevant now is to know, for instance, when you have a big blockbuster in the US, you know that now you have Caribbean on it. You have Caribbean for sure. You have Caribbean, one or two or three Caribbean. What is very interesting now is to go towards the real films already existing, broadcasted, and to know where is the Caribbean touch in all that. Because there's a Caribbean touch. We just have to find it and to increase, I mean, this visibility. It can be a first way, I mean, to strengthen what we have to do in referring to production and to produce together, according to me. But for sure that Guadeloupe is willing to participate to something, to put maybe something in the basket, to impulse this creativity and maybe push us, to do things together, because as we said before, united we stand.
Yeah, Kendall, let me just add something there. So the OECS have collaborated with Guadeloupe in the past to do some training for writers, something that we would like to do to build on that experience. But I think a key element here too is we need to see our film commissions in the region, not just the OECS, but in the region, functioning and to provide the kind of support. I mean, the reality is that we do not have film commissions operating in many of the islands, and that is a gap that is impacting on the ability of filmmakers to really get their work out. When you look at what is happening with Jam Pro in Jamaica, Barbados project with Annette and the other people. We had somebody from Curacao on this call earlier on. Eloise is gone, but she is a film commissioner. They're doing a lot of work. So I think we need to see some of that happening. The question about the film fund, no, there is no film fund in the Caribbean. There's no fund. However, there are a number of agencies now at this time looking at supporting the film sector. There is the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank Creative Industries Fund, that is providing a lot of support for creatives across the creative industry sector, including films. They have supported accelerator programs and so on. Caribbean Export is also involved in a number of initiatives to support. And also we have the OECS CBU supporting the film sector. So I think what we need to do is a convergence of all of these activities, all of these programs, so that we can see greater impact. But I would say, and Kendall, so that should lead us into the second round to get some of the solutions. But just to start the thing, that we need to see not just at the macro level, at the support level, institutional level, but at the film level, how many of our film associations are functioning effectively to take advantage of new opportunities? How many of us involved in the industry really engage in getting some of the work going? I mean, this afternoon we have this event for filmmakers. The question is, how many of our filmmakers saw it necessary to even join the conversation? So these are the kinds of questions I think we need to look at in talking about the reset. So Mr. John, so we can maybe use that to segue into the second part and to look at some of those solutions.
Yes, I think that's an ideal time. I think I can personally respond to some of the things that you mentioned, and then after, of course, throw it out to our panelists. Tony suggested something about basically getting our own server. I think that's actually a very good idea. I think there are agencies that will support that as a cultural initiative. I think UNESCO is actually one of them that might be interested in putting together, if a number of Caribbean islands decided that we're going to buy a server and put all our content on there and try to promote our content. I think actually that's a very good idea, and I think UNESCO would actually support something of that nature. So that's a very good idea, and I think it's something we should probably try and get at least test the ground on. I think someone referred to the Bitcoin as a possible way of payment. Barbados made some strides in that. I think there's a lot of ground that still needs to be covered in my estimation. I do have a contact of someone high in the Bitcoin industry, and maybe I could ask them what are their thoughts on that. I think the more likely for now seems to be the concept of using phone credit. That might be probably the easier thing to do, but we shouldn't, I guess, discredit any of the other options. We could now probably segue into the panelists. We
have one other question. We have somebody, Elliot Prince, before we do that. So let's take that last question.
Elliot Prince.
Elliot Prince.
Good question. So let me scroll up there. That's part of the 10 habitat. Could you read out to me? I might be scrolling up. I'm not seeing it.
Okay, the person went off. So let's continue then.
Oh, he's there.
He's back.
He's back.
Error, guys. Okay. So can he? Is he writing or?
Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead.
Okay. So can we start back in the order that we had? We could probably start again with Dale, and regarding recommendations going forward, both on the micro and the macro policy making, as well as individual level, what filmmakers can do to reset, as we said, the audiovisual industry post COVID-19.
That's a very big question, and it is one that calls for a lot of diplomacy in the response.
All right,
a recognition
loaded question
to the industry and what we get out. Sadly, the people with the capacity to pay, who want to benefit from the content created within the region, do not want to pay. That's one of the fundamental problems. So I hear Mr. Branford about CBU, for example, but in reality, they want, and it's not just CBU, most broadcasters want content absolutely free. They do not want to pay for content, but they want to broadcast your content, split it up, put ads in it, broadcast it, and offer you exposure. I think the time for that has long passed. Yeah? And for the industry to go anywhere, first and foremost, there needs to be an understanding of our value, what we put in, and what we would like to get out from the people who benefit from it the most financially. And these are the broadcasters. So unless there is a harmonized way of dealing with that, we will forever be spinning top in mud. And the truth is, we're not fighting against each other. We all want the very same thing. So let me give you an example. Untold Stories airs in 22 countries in the region, plus New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Canada, 6 days a week through Paravision. And it also airs on most of the television stations within the OECS on their primary station, I think, except for St. Vincent. But yet still, we struggle. We struggle to be paid for our content. And it's years later, broadcasters still want to tell you, no, they can't sell advertising through it. Yet it is one of them more popular. On the other hand, we pay for wrestling from the States or Young and the Restless, which is tired and played out. But television stations will pay for said content, but not pay the local producers. Should that be addressed through the various film associations in the islands? Perhaps. Should there be legislation? Perhaps. Or perhaps it can, people like the OECS Competitive Business Unit can take the lead by having a system in place so that these broadcasters, once they go to air or through cable, they must, one, have a certain amount of their content being local to fertilize the industry, and secondly, pay for said content. That's it.
Thanks, Dale. Again, you've made some points that have been made before. The question about whether these stations are even paying for the soap operas and the wrestling is another thing, because most times they just they just download the material or they just relate. And of course, these companies out there, we're too small a dot to pay attention as to who's stealing content or not. So you're really a rock in a hard place when you tell them, hey, we want us to pay, we want you to pay for our local content. And they say, but we're getting glossy stuff for free from the States. And so yes, people might want to see your Caribbean content, but at the end of the day, it's going to cost us, and so we're not willing to pay for it. You know?
But Kendall, let's look at it. Let's look at it in this regard. I mean, you are a production manager for a station. What would be the understanding from a station's perspective to ask a local producer to give their content to your television station to fertilize viewership, yet the producer for said content would have to pay your station? What is the understanding? What is the rationale?
The rationale of that. I must say, I could never quite understand it, especially because it's a give and take. Essentially, they know that you usually pay for airtime. That's what somebody do. You pay for airtime, but also you need content. And what a lot of local TV stations have done, of course, is that they get all that content for free, illegally, of course, and then they play it. And so now that, you know, a private producer of content approaches them, then they say, well, you know, we don't have to play your content. We don't have to play your content because we have content already airing, and it's fancy, glossy stuff that the world wants to see. It's American-based, and that's high-quality stuff. All right. So already it has to be, again, dealt with on a policy level, just like we say for the radio stations when we talk about minimum of local content. Canada and other countries have done that for both their video and audio industries. And so we have to do the same. We have to do the same, but again, the TV stations are going to do it for themselves. That has to be filtered from the top. That's all I can say.
So, Kendall, Dale, we've walked this path so many times and made those very same, you know, claims to the powers that be. So here's a great situation where we have OECS now listening to our issues here, because OECS would have some clout, I believe, with the powers that be to listen to this particular issue. This issue has been going on for years and years, and you, me, our association, or any individual filmmaker will not change this. It has to be taken from the highest level, right? That's why a while ago I made the appeal that perhaps the OECS, in this particular instance, the OECS can begin the discussions at that level that will provide the policy that to make that change necessary. I mean, all of the stations already have an agreement when they sign the contracts and thing with government, when they get a license, that they have to give the government a particular amount of airtime. Mm-hmm. So it's not impossible for the governments, the policymakers, to establish that they also have to provide a certain amount of local content. Mm-hmm. Understood? I mean, that's like, to me, that's a no-brainer, but we don't have anyone who is going to discuss this, and hopefully after this meeting, somebody picks up and starts to move this forward, because we've spoken about this at so many different forums and nothing has happened. I mean, I spoke about this at the CBU AGM in Cuba, and everybody said, oh yeah, this makes sense. That's blah, blah, blah. How many years later, nothing has happened?
Yes, yes.
So
again, go ahead.
I had to, I'm going to say my age is going to tell, all right? 75.
We wouldn't listen. So
some of you were not born. I looked at the Broadcasting Act for Dominica, which was in the process of being amended. And one of the recommendations was that there are a channel allocated to only local content which the producer must pay, well, not the producer, the provider of the channels have to pay for. A certain percentage of their stuff must be local content, not inclusive of news, because they were saying, oh, news is local content. That's not local content.
Yep.
So you need to get rid of those things. I mean, the Broadcasting Act was reviewed, nothing was done about it, okay? And it's not, talking among ourselves is not going to change anything. I have learned that, and my age is, my gray hairs tell me that, okay? I've been talking about it for years. I think we need to get our ministers dealing with communication to, when they have their regional meetings, this is something that is important to the sector and must be addressed by the sector. And I think that is one of the things that we as a group can do, is make recommendations to our ministers in what we need from those cable providers.
Absolutely.
Again, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with what Ms. Bully has said, but I'm thinking maybe we have an opportunity to pursue the digital markets and let the TV, you know, I'm just there thinking maybe we fought this fight and we could probably continue fighting this fight, but I'm thinking maybe we can just go down the line of like the Netflix, and at the end of the day, we go onto a digital platform and that people are naturally going to gravitate in there anyway. TVs are already almost obsolete. I talk to a number of people and I say, you saw it on TV? They say, no, actually, I don't really watch TV. You know, I'm watching online, I'm watching this, I'm watching that. Maybe it's time we just give up that fight and we pursue wholeheartedly that digital platform, which we will be able to control. And nobody else tells us what to play, etc. We have the servers, we put that in place, and we charge people for content. And if not, at least make money from the numbers, the viewers, like how YouTube will run. You know, at the end of the day, that might be the way we have to pursue. Yes.
Let me just say, I sense your frustration, which I'm very well aware of. But here's the thing. You know, if you want to get through a door, sometimes you have to make sure you get your toe in, right? So that the door doesn't shut on you, you'll be able to wedge yourself in. Whatever we do, whether we have our own server, whether we get somebody to come in and invest and create a server, it all deals with policy. And if you can't get the policy makers to start with your own people, how are you going to get them to start to protect you? Because once you start doing that, you need policy to protect you. So how are you going to get your policymakers to protect you? You understand what I'm saying? There must be policy created that we can go to and say, okay, this is how we have to operate. This is how you have to operate. These laws are what protects us and protects our IP. I mean, even that situation of not knowing that somebody can steal my ideas and I have no recourse because nothing is in place, is a problem, is an issue. So we're seeing the silver lining, but you know, we want to get there, but there's a little bit of grunge work that needs to be done. There's a little bit of foundation that needs to be built in order that we stand on firm ground when we do that. I mean, if you go and you deal with Netflix, and Netflix decides, okay, well, you know, we're going to give them a raw deal anyway because they're desperate. They need. There's nothing to protect you, really. So this is why I'm saying you need to get our policymakers on board so that they can put in the legislation that we need to protect ourselves and to advance the industry.
Okay, point taken. I realize we're running out of time, or we ran out of time already, but so let me just run quickly to the rest of the panelists for them to essentially, each person just have their say as to how we can proceed post-COVID-19. Can we go with Toga?
I agree with you, Mr. John, in terms of having a Caribbean version of Netflix. The same way I was able to convince 49 plus 7 people to make a feature film that has had international recognition and competed in and earned second place to a $119,000 US film. We can negotiate with existing content holders and create an online platform without having to spend the amount of money we think we have to spend on purchasing servers and establishing protocols and so on, because we can rent these servers online from basically any website hosting providers and get the largest package that can store up to 50 terabytes. And as we grow our storage systems. We can work with website designers and developers to make a seamless platform to host the Caribbean content. And whoever has the chairmanship to lead all of the different content holders to become part of this platform would be the one who will be receiving a round of applause, because he's the one that brought everyone together. But arguing about which government is supposed to provide what funds and which broadcaster should support this, or et cetera, it's not going to get anywhere forward. It requires Elon Musk of the Caribbean. That makes sense. We need someone who's driven enough to make this happen, and it's needed because all the content online that is Caribbean is spread throughout the internet. And why should someone pay $4.99 US for my film when just for twice the amount of money per month, they have access to Netflix's entire library? Does that make sense? Yes, I got quite a few sales, but it doesn't make an economic incentive for an audience member. But the issue behind that now is facilitating payments, because Netflix, like I said, their audience has credit cards. That's an issue that we are faced with in the Caribbean. People want Caribbean content. How are they supposed to pay for it?
Thank you. Appreciate it, definitely. The OECS, I hope they're paying attention, because that seems to be the way, at least I would like to go. Let's go to our next panelist. That's Tony, what are your final comments?
I mean, I agree totally, because I was thinking about this this proposal with Suzette. We already had before like this idea to improve it. I think it's very, very interesting, because I think I had a lack of understanding. I have a problem to understand, because I thought before that we have a large part of the Caribbean people who don't really have access to any server, because their credit card cannot be recognized, or they cannot use this, or they don't have credit card too, because they prefer to pay with coins, or I don't know what kind of system. It was for this reason, so I've suggested this to get our own server. But after the explanation of our colleague Torga, Mr. Torga, I understood better now. But I agree totally with what we can do now about this platform. If we want to see our production, our Caribbean production, for sure that we have to be online every day, everywhere. When we're talking about Netflix, not what kind of Netflix. I'm in touch with Netflix France, for instance, because we are dealing now. Our region put 100,000 euros, and Netflix bring 200,000 euros. It means 300,000 euros to start something. We do that with Netflix France. We do that with TV5 Monde. It's a French TV channel, but international French TV channel. We do that with France Television, with France TV. And I think we do that with Canal Plus, which is a very strong partner to our production. And I think we are willing to do it with other broadcasters. And for sure, if we have a Caribbean broadcaster, it's the first place, place where we want to invest. It's very clear for us because we think Caribbean, even if we, okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I covered everyone. Is Mrs. Bully?
Yes, okay. Dealing with the issue which we have on the second part of the agenda, that is to reopen activities in the sector and to sustain long-term growth in the aftermath of the pandemic, okay? I made a few notes here. We need to take advantage of the time we have now to get trained, begin writing scripts, get funding to produce those scripts, and collaborate to get those scripts produced. Collaboration on productions is very important, as you mentioned. It is to be noted that in some islands, collaboration is limited to non-existent. For some persons involved in this sector, for instance, we write, we shoot, but we need editors. Like editors, this is their bread and butter. That is all they do. They're doing ads, and they can charge $10,000 for an ad. And this is a 3-minute ad. So they think if they're editing a short film for you, they can, and the short film is 20 minutes, they will charge 3 times, you know, how many, for the editing of the film, okay? But we all know that these short films cannot pay commercial rates for editing. There needs to be more training done on the set and opportunities for having apprentices on the set. This is so important. One of the things that I had negotiated with Pirate Master, that is that 13-part series they shot in Dominica, was that they get some young men, train them as camera assistants, and you know, 2 of those guys go every year to shoot Survivor. They are now, well, one is in LA now because they were supposed to have left. The other one had to come back because they had canceled the production. These things are important. Persons need to be trained in production to cut down the time being wasted on the set. Training in breakdown of your script, training in storyboarding, training in continuity, training in preparation of a short list. The list goes on. We need these things to be done. And I think that is something that SOBA's OECS can do, and maybe we can work with Interreg and with Tony and see if we cannot do some of those workshops online, some in Guadeloupe, some in Dominica or St. Lucia or wherever. There are endless stories to be told. However, persons need to be trained in how to tell film. Okay, this is a major problem for budding filmmakers. They don't understand what storytelling in film is. Okay, we need to create a directory for our technicians in the industry. Okay, who do we have in Dominica that's good at, say, motion graphics that can be used when St. Lucia wants somebody? Or if I want somebody, if I need animation, I go to St. Lucia and get animation. We need to create directories, and that is something SOBAs that we could probably get some funding from CBD from, or even from Interreg, so that we can create a directory of persons involved in the industry in the English and French Caribbean. We need to create a film fund, okay? I know in the 70s and 80s, we've been talking to the cable providers about creating a film fund. I remember Alwyn and I had gone to both, at the time it was mapping, and we had gone to mapping to discuss setting up a film fund for film production. And it was suggested through a friend of ours who is now in Canada doing film, that why don't we get government agree to put $1 on every provider bill, whether it be Flow or Digicel, and that money be put in a fund for making of our own stories, okay? And government can support it with their citizen by investment money.
Oh, for sure.
But there is a way that people can contribute to the setting up of that fund. I'm sure these problems are not unique to Dominica alone. And we need to, as a group, come up with some things that we need to follow up on, Sobers, so that with platforms like Zoom, we can even do the training online, you know, Sobers. Okay, so this is something we have to look at and see how it can be done. And then Interreg. Okay, let's see if we cannot collaborate between Martinique, Guadeloupe, and the rest of the Caribbean.
May I just say something in support of what Mrs. Bully just said? Kendall, I know you're aware that the other main area for us is that of training. And I personally feel that one of the things, we talk about telling our stories. And what I have found is that generally we do not have all the capacity necessary. You have some gems, right? Like this, Mr. Toga there and his team, etc. But if we have to tell our stories, we need a wider, if you want to say a wider basket of creatives to do so, especially in animation. You have to have the training, and I'm going to support her on that. You have to have the training to develop the capacity. It's not just drawing. It's not. There's so many other areas for a production pipeline to really work to move that thing out with quality and efficiency. And so there are so many areas to train persons. There's also the need for training in the business of film and the business of animation. Okay, one of the things that we in the Caribbean mess up all the time about is the fact that we look at consultants and other people out there and they say, how are they paying these guys so much money? But we always feel that we have to underprice ourselves because we don't know our value. And so we need to understand the market. In other words, we need to get that training to understand the business of the business, all right? If we can't do that, then we can't be competitive. The other thing is, I think that we need to, going back to the collaboration, which is something that I've been at for many years. You need more collaboration between studios, inter-island studios, and clustering, the support for clustering efforts. You know, 2-3 studios coming together. We're doing a project now, and we have, the project consists of both animation and live action PSAs, right? So we could try to do everything ourselves and then get muddled in mediocrity and all that sort of stuff, because, but we work with a partner studio who is raring to go. We manage, we direct, whatever, but they execute, and there's no problem. We need to understand that if we want to get where we want to go, we must have these clustering approaches to that. A studio in Grenada, a studio in Dominica, a studio in St. Lucia, working on a project. It widens our footprint, our production footprint, that we can take on big projects. We can take on projects, not just small PSAs for an island, but we can actually work with Big Jump, or we can work with other studios creating something for Netflix or HBO, which we have had some experience in that. Inter-studio harmonization. The other thing is, you know the story of the Tower of Babel. Everybody speaking different languages. So it was chaos. We have a situation where everybody is operating at different levels. They train on different software. They work on different platforms. And so when you call a studio to work with you, then either that becomes very difficult, or there's a learning curve, which in this, as you know, that doesn't work. So we need to, across the region, begin to harmonize. It doesn't have to be a strict across the board, but if 3 studios can come in, there must be support for harmonized training that lets them get up to a particular level that allows them to speak to each other, right? And in order to deliver, there's so much that we need the support for, and some of the agencies need to look at it from the standpoint of what is needed, which is get to the studios, let them tell you what's needed, and take it from there. Because sometimes persons try to decide for you what you need, and it may not be entirely what you're looking for. So I support a lot of what Mrs. Bully said there, and I just want to add that little thing about the collaboration of studios, especially for animation. And in terms of the training, capacity development, we need to do that so that we can tell our stories outstandingly. So they cannot be critiqued negatively, you know, and we can tell more stories quicker.
Thank you very much, Milton. I think we have way past our 6:30 deadline regarding this webinar. So I think we just have to use some closing words essentially. Unless, Mr. Sobers, you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, Elias, are you still interested? You wanted to say something? You wanted to make a comment? Elias DP?
I'm sorry, I don't want to make it feel like we've because it does feel like we've passed the point a little bit, but to the idea of sort of the filmmakers banding together to create a platform, right, for ourselves and for each other. I think that absolutely has to be done. I think that is perhaps the first thing that we should be even focused on, because on the the policymakers up to where film now and where film needs to be in the Caribbean. I don't think we can sit back and wait on them anymore. Egg farmers and chicken farmers are still debating with policy makers as to whether or not their stuff should be given priority in the supermarkets that we. If these people can't even understand agriculture, they're not going to get to the point where they understand all of the things that go into film and digital film, especially with IP and all of everything that is required to bring the industry to where it needs to be. And I think we have to be the driver of that and make them catch up to us.
I second that.
Yeah, I think that was the point I wanted to end on this afternoon before I hand over to Kendall. Let me just use the opportunity on behalf of the OECS CBU to thank the panelists for a tremendous evening, great conversation. To everybody, thank you very much for making the time this afternoon. To all our participants, I think we had about 40 participants during this afternoon session. So we want to thank all of you. Those of you who've stayed on until the end, thank you very much. Those who asked questions and who sent in comments on the chat, thank you very much. So some really interesting things came out this afternoon. The last point that was made by Elias, I think, is fundamental to us going forward. The film sector has to really have come to some kind of introspection and look at how we work together. I think that is a point that we need to look at in all the islands. We need to have stronger association, but also we need to have stronger collaboration among practitioners to ensure that things happen. The other point is the issue of policy will always be something that we have to look at. So we will play our part from the OECS standpoint to see how we can really engage member states in some of this policy debates and policy discussion. As Anita has pointed out, there is a policy on telecommunications, I think, for member states. And so we can look at some of these policies and going forward. I said earlier on, we need to have our film commission or film groups at the national level to really support the work at the national level, because regional organizations cannot do everything. I think there are things that we can do at a regional level to cluster and to support the development of the sector, but we need to see some action at the country level taking place. So part of what we're going to do is to sensitize our member states to see how we can form film commissions. Dominica has a film officer or film commissioner. And I know that, of course, Martin and Guadeloupe has, but in the other islands, I'm not sure that there are film commissions. So we need to see some of that happening. The point or the suggestion by Torga for the phone credits it's a fascinating idea that we can consider. I see a number of people on the chat talking about it as something that is practical that we can look at. But the overall problem about e-commerce is something that not just for film, but generally across the board for the creative industries, whether it be music, it be festivals, that is a big problem. We have to pay great attention to our e-commerce platform, how we are able to collect, well, first of all, monetize, and how we're able to collect monies for our creation. So that is an issue that we need to look at. But the other point is about collaboration. We need to see, and Milton, I know that you're passionate about that, and you spoke about it in a way that reinforces the point over and over. And so we need to see some inter-studio collaboration. Also, we need to see more co-production, even among ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are professionals who can work together, who can write, who can produce, who can direct. We need to see some of the collaboration taking place. So these are some of the issues that that we saw coming out of this conversation this afternoon. So I want to really thank everybody. Just to say, Tony was saying that there are 10 film commissions in the region, but from the OECS, I believe I am aware of only one film commission functioning at this time. So we want to see some more of that happening in the region. So thank you very much. Let me ask Kendall as the moderator to give us his closing remarks. And so good evening and stay safe.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you very much. So again, I don't want to drag this too long, but essentially, I think we can say, as Obama said, we are the change we've been waiting for. I think if we keep looking for external, for the powers that be, et cetera, to do what we need to get done, then it's most likely we're going to be waiting for another 10 to 15 years before anything gets done. We have to decide among ourselves and actually implement some of these things. And some of these things that you say we don't need the governments to be involved in, to be honest. It's really just an association or the will of all the filmmakers working together for our common good. I mean, the suggestions of phone credit, you getting of a server, these are all things that are very possible, and we don't really need government involvement in. And as I said, we can always facilitate that discussion along the way, but at least let's get things moving in the sector, and then afterwards we can probably address some of those policies. In our local environment, there's a genre of music called the Denry segment that grew up in St. Lucia. It just blew up very recently, and it essentially took on a life of its own. And then the government had no choice after a point but to get involved. When people in China and Japanese are dancing to your music and their followings of 5 million, you have to get involved. I think that's what we really need to do. We have to force their hands by getting the stuff done and getting the support. And then by virtue of that, they have no choice but get involved, because it gets embarrassing after a while. So essentially, once we agree to that, I think we should look to the next try and stay in touch with each other. We're going to keep also the emails and contact each other, and so that we can implement a number of these things that we discussed here. So once again, thank you very much. It was a very insightful discussion, and I'm hoping that there's a lot of takeaway that we can actually practically implement. Thanks again.